One of my favorite things about YouTube comments are these beautiful moments of serendipity you get sometimes. Looking through my Planet With comments, we've got Roman Go Bowling making the statement, "Why is nobody talking about the sound design in battles? It's fucking dope. Wub wub wham," right into my speakers. Followed right after F. Foom, who says, "I watched a solid 4 episodes of the show and I cannot understand how people could sit through this in its entirety with this ear-raped audio design." So, what the hell are these two people talking about? How can they have such completely different opinions on the sound design in the show? Well, simply put, like any other element of production, there's a matter of taste going on here. In the case of sound design, it's particularly fascinating because it's not something that a lot of people even pay attention to or make note of. A lot of people will, even if it affects the impact that the show has on them, they don't necessarily pick up on it or say anything about it. I think a show with a very similar type of sound design to Planet With, that's even more pronounced, would be the JoJo's Bizarre Adventure anime adaptation, and the sound design is a big part of why I find that show difficult to watch, because of the fact that the sound effects are so fucking loud. The show will be going along normally, characters, talking, yelling a lot of the time, which I also find kind of annoying, but then when something happens, it's like, and it's just so fucking gratingly loud. And it makes me think, is there not a better way to sell me on the impact of something than to just make the loudest possible noise? Now, this is something that gets criticized a lot about, American Hollywood movies, stuff like Transformers, for just having, the deluge of loud sound effects and blasting music and all this shit. And other people, of course, love it because they feel that impact, and it is very raw and cathartic on some level. It's just that I know there are other ways to do it. I know that there are ways that don't involve, clipping the audio, that don't involve making it as loud as possible or forcing me to sort of have this uncomfortable feeling where I've turned up the audio to hear the vocals, and then suddenly I'm being blasted with something so much louder that it hurts my ears because I've already adjusted my volume appropriately for the speaking volume. And this isn't to say that doing something extremely loud like that has no artistic merit. I mean, in JoJo's case, it seems to be precisely the point, is to overwhelm you with how loud it is so that it's shocking, because a lot of the show is about shocking, intense moments, but just doesn't necessarily appeal to me, or someone like, F. Foom here, who's like, I can't sit through the sound design in Planet With. And granted, I don't think Planet With is nearly as over-the-top as JoJo is with it, but I did think that while some of those moments were very cathartic, and sometimes I even enjoyed it during the major battles because it wasn't so overdone, I wouldn't say that it was praiseworthy sound design as compared to a show that I would actually geek out over the sound design of. Now, overly abrasive sound effects are pretty easy to notice, as is voice acting. If you are attuned to it, you can usually, determine whether you think someone's voice sounds nice or not. But there's a lot of more subtle things about anime audio design that can bother or impress me. For instance, I have a huge problem with the fact that a lot of anime compresses the voice acting too much. So, with compression, basically what you're doing is making the highs lower and the lows higher. Usually, overall, you're making it as loud as it could possibly be without clipping. So if I were to, say, do a PCP podcast, for instance, because of the fact that everyone has such different recording quality on their audio, we all compress our audio so that it's easier to mix them against each other, to look at each one and figure out how to mix them correctly. And in podcasts where, the speaking is basically the whole focus of the audio, this will give you a very clean and professional sound. However, personally, I find that it becomes headache-inducing because there isn't enough variance. And in normal speech, in normal conversation, you will hear that level of variance in how someone is talking. And it just, like, when you hear it for so long, it just slowly pounds away at your brain, and it makes it difficult to listen to longer podcasts, in my opinion. So personally, when I do my vlogs and stuff, and when I do, main channel videos, anything really, I usually don't compress my audio because I personally will get a headache if I listen to it back when it's compressed. And I've criticized, the way that there are other YouTubers who go all out on, like, making their voice sound as professional as possible, but it is difficult to listen to for me. Now, the other advantage of compression is that it's easier to mix compressed voice against music. If you are using music in the background of a video, then it will get muddled if you have, low points and high points where you're trying to mix the music against one or the other, like, if you have music that's, let's say, minus 13 decibels, and it's like, it sounds just right over the louder parts of your voice, but, muddles the quieter parts. So, like, you compress it so that it's all one thing and it's easier to mix with. Well, a lot of anime uses this theory, too. PA Works shows generally tend to have this problem. This is probably my biggest single criticism of Shirobako. One of my favorite anime, love it to death, but the overcompressed voice acting, it slowly grates on me, especially in a show with so much dialogue and so much, like, chaos already going on in the narrative that already could cause you a headache. Like, adding that on top of it is just even worse. And, a lot of shows that are high quality will do this. Shows that they're just doing it because it will sound more professional momentarily, but it can also cause a headache or just cause you to feel as though the performances are less natural because it doesn't sound like how a person sounds. It sounds like how a person sounds after having been mixed in a studio. And that's great for music. If you're trying to produce, like, a song, you want to fucking put as many effects on their voice as possible because it's not about listening to what they're saying. It's about just the way that the voice is used as an instrument in the song and how to best make that instrument sound good within the song. But, if you're trying to record dialogue, it's going to sound less natural that way. So, of course, the best way to capture dialogue would be to, somehow do it live. Like, to get someone's voice in the same environment as the place that they are in the show, which is extremely difficult to do because audio equipment just, like, it doesn't necessarily, it doesn't work the same way as the human ear. You're not going to hear things the same way through a microphone as they sound in person, and that's why it's, it's difficult to get good audio. But, like, when someone goes out of their way, or if they can't capture it well enough, they use digital manipulation to at least make it sound as natural as possible, or to, incorporate unique sound effects, unique Foley, and stuff like that. You can create something really interesting. I would say that the anime that I can think of with the best sound design is Serial Experiments Lain. And that's a show that you can look at visually, and if you don't listen to it at all, if you just look at it, you might think, wow, this show is kinda ugly. Like, even though it has really unique visual style, and it's, extremely distinctive, the actual frame-for-frame drawings, you could tell the show was, pretty cheaply made. You could tell that there wasn't a lot of animation in the show, and even the artwork is inconsistent as fuck. But when you hear it while you're watching it, it draws you into the experience because there is so much dynamism in the sound, so many unique sounds you won't hear anywhere else, no real stock sound effects, lots of stuff that was probably created with really advanced, like, analog production. If you really want to know how deep the rabbit hole can go, you need to look into, like, noise artists who will find extremely unique ways to create noise. I think of the band Clipping, a rap group who uses, like, noise effects to create sounds, and they will just invent their own instruments or use, like, really esoteric sound capturing devices, just, like, all sorts of technology in order to create their sounds, just to make them as unique sounding as possible. Where you hear a song like Work Work, and it has these clanging metallic noises that you will never hear in another song. And the reason that that's possible is that they created the sounds by taking a spoon and hitting it against the side of a canteen at, like, 100 27 different spots. They like had like 100 different sounds of them hitting this canteen in different places, and then they like made a keyboard out of that and created a beat out of those noises, you know. And then of course through digital manipulation they can make it sound extremely crisp and clean and great, and you will never hear another song that sounds like it, and it sounds awesome. So when I see shows that go that extra mile to have like really phenomenal audio, it's like that is praiseworthy. But in a show like Planet With, they're just using pretty regular sound effects. It's not any sounds you're not going to hear somewhere else. It's not like it's not as though they've gone out of their way to have really natural sounding dialogue or anything like that. It's just that they have really loud, hyper compressed whoosh when somebody gets punched, and that can be satisfying, but also it can be the exact opposite to somebody who is more of an audiophile, you know? So, yeah, it's really interesting to see the different ways that people feel about audio and anime, because obviously there are probably some people who would watch a show like Lane and be annoyed by the weird noises in that show. There's probably some people who'd be like, this makes me uncomfortable. I remember when I made my last Lane video, the Useless Anime Knowledge one, where I used the soundtrack of the show as the background music in the video, and I got at least one comment that was like, could you use less like paranoia-inducing music in these? And I'm like, well, this is the music from the show. Like, of course I'm going to use the music from the show. The show is paranoia-inducing, that's the point. But, not everybody wants to feel those feels. So yeah, I guess that's all I have to say about that.